Hello and welcome to another episode of the CLEO EDGE podcast. My name is JC Polanco, and I'm the president and CEO of the Council on Legal Education Opportunity. Please visit our website at cleoinc.org and follow us on all social media platforms at CLEO Scholars. And don't forget to subscribe and press like on this episode so that you can be notified of our next and new episodes. We bring you some of the most incredible leaders across the country, across the spectrum. We have champions of diversities and attorneys to come share their stories about perseverance, what they see on the horizon, some advice for us to continue in the legal profession. And this time around, we have with us a CLEO scholar, an author and attorney, Bruce Jackson. Bruce Jackson wrote this incredible book called Never Far From Home, where he shares his incredible story. Without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Attorney Bruce Jackson. And Attorney Bruce Jackson, welcome to the CLEO EDGE podcast.
Hey, listen, it's an honor, JC, to be here with you and your audience. I'm extremely excited.
We are so happy. I have board members. I have staff members. I can't believe that you're here with us today. They were so excited. I know that they were sending me messages. Good luck when you speak to Bruce. He's just fantastic. He's down to earth, and I agree with them 100%, Bruce. Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Bruce, I can't put this book down. I can't put it down, Bruce. You got me. You got me. I mean, this is such an incredible story. I want you to tell us what motivated you to write this book. And I know it's going to be a movie one day. And we were kidding beforehand as who's going to be acting as Bruce Jackson.
Right. There's no question. I think the reason for me writing the book, to be quite honest with you, is the entertainment clients of mine. I was an entertainment attorney previously, and they approached me 5 years ago and said, Bruce, you have to write a book, essentially because you come from our community. You're one of us. And most of the people in our community, they want to be actors or entertainers or athletes. And you pretty much carved a separate way or a niche for yourself. And we need to show people in our community there are other options available. And when they first approached me, I wasn't quite ready because you have to be vulnerable to write a book like that. So 2 years ago, I was approached again and I said, this is the right time. And I decided to write it really to inspire people in my community, to be able to break through barriers and obstacles that they're confronted with, because I think society dealt us a bad hand, right? And after I sat down with my vice chairman, Brad Smith of Microsoft, he said, well, Bruce, this book is going to inspire everyone. It's not just people in the inner city. It's people in rural America have obstacles and challenges. LGBT plus community, right? Women, immigrants. They all have obstacles. So he said, everyone's going to be touched and can be inspired by this book. And when I finished writing the book, I totally agree. It's about really inspiring everyone to break through, to crack through despite this situation. But JC, in addition to that, is about inspiring those who are privileged as well to break through their obstacle, but to give them proximity to the challenges that we go through. And hopefully that will breed empathy, and they will all jump on what I call the equity train, right? Because we want everyone to come on to help us to remove some of these barriers. But it's also about inspiring people like you and me to share and tell our story, because oftentimes we grow up in a community, we move out and never come back, and that's a crime to the community. And I think if we tell our story, is the most incredible tool that we can use to inspire the next generation. So we have to go back, show up, and just remind them that they are us, right? We're them and they're us. And like we broke through, they can break through, and give the system time to change, because it's not going to change right away. And if we wait, we'll lose another generation of what I consider brilliant minds in the inner city, rural area, women, immigrants as well. And we can't afford to lose anyone.
It's so inspiring to hear that, because so many of us relate to your story. I'm from the Bronx, and I grew up in poverty, and reading, I was captivated because you were from the other side of the city. It takes a little longer to get there, but or the Brooklyn side, as we say. But it's a lot of the conditions you faced, Bruce, the conditions of having to see what you saw growing up, the pressures that you were under, are some that we can all relate to. Now, I'm a son of immigrants from the Caribbean, right? And I experienced that firsthand, and I found exactly what you say so true. I was inspired by your story. I was motivated. by how you managed and handled that pressure. I felt as if we were brothers on the same block reading this.
Well, we are in many respects, right? There's no
Yes.
question about it. We all are. That's why I think it's important for us all to come together and really help all of us break through these barriers, right? Because we talk about inequities that exist. I tell people all the time, no one's smarter than anyone else, right? And I had to learn that, right? Because if you take someone out of the Bronx, you take someone out of Brownsville, and you put them in an affluent area anywhere, right? And if you take someone from an affluent area and put them in the inner city, they'll struggle. But the person who's now moving from the inner city to an affluent area, they'll thrive. So it's all about resources and environment. And you wonder why it's taking people so long to get the resources to our communities.
It's so, you mentioned something that fascinates me. Often diversity is under attack. And you mentioned the diversity train a few minutes ago. And you mentioned something that I found very interesting, which is helping those that were privileged see the importance of diversity. Right. And you're telling them the story. So changing hearts and minds is also another mission of this incredible book.
Oh, no, it certainly is. I think in the book, I won't get ahead of myself, but at one point I talk about myself getting arrested, right, as an attorney at Microsoft after closing a $100 million deal. I went out and I celebrated in the office. Then I went to celebrate with my friends in the projects, and we bought crabs and beer. Then I got arrested. So when I share that story with my colleagues at Microsoft, I essentially stated to them, listen, this person got arrested who was a professional African-American, and they didn't quite believe it. And then when I said at the end, I said, that person is me, their jaws dropped. And they said, it couldn't have happened to you, Bruce. I said, well, the reality is I can close $1 billion and $10 billion deals here at Microsoft, which we do. And when I leave, I'm a Black man in America, and you go live your privileged life. And no one's actually asking for my ID and saying, where do you work? Or did you close $1 billion, $2 billion, $10 billion deal? They're just looking at me as a Black person. And when I said that, they said, we can't believe that happened to you, Bruce. We need to do something about it. So it's bringing them in, right? Giving them proximity, getting empathy. And there's people who want to help. And I think that's why we need to share the story. We all need to share the story.
You mentioned something else that really captivated me. The idea that what would that kid from that part of town where we come from, what would he do in an affluent area? Often when diversity is under attack, Bruce, one of the things I like to talk about is the idea of that track where we're all on this race. Some of the folks on this race were literally chained to the starting line. Some of them couldn't afford sneakers. Some of us have never learned how to run. Some of us couldn't even get into the stadium to get on the track. And the idea of diversity is just trying to create an equal playing field here where we could all have an equal shot. Imagine what that kid with a B average living where we're from do in an area where instead of dodging bullets and gang members and drugs on their way to school is dodging butterflies, right? And I've always given that example. Imagine how that student can do under those same conditions. So interested
the student would thrive. There's no question about it. There's no magic. I'm not a rocket science to figure that out, right? I mean, we talked about the pandemic hit and everyone started talking about the fact that broadband's an issue. I'm like, well, inequity's always been an issue. Broadband's probably shedding light on it to those who had closed eyes, right? Yeah. Because now we realize that broadband, not just in urban America, but in rural America as well, it's just not there. And we realize that broadband is actually the gatekeeper to one, education, right? Is the gatekeeper to health, is the gatekeeper to jobs. People go online to look for jobs. People go online to train for jobs. So it's the inequity. We need to deal with that. We talk about affordable broadband, but affordability is still unaffordable to some. So it should be free, right? It should be a baseline free sort of situation.
That's so true. I got to ask, tell me about the title. Tell me about the title.
The title, Never Far From Home, is essentially the fact that from a distance standpoint, Microsoft office is only less than a mile away from where I work. So I go to work and we close $1 billion deals, but I pretty often walk back to my community because I have family and friends there. So from a distance standpoint, it's not far. But in terms of my heart and going there pretty often to visit family and friends, I'm always there. And if you read the book, there's just certain parts where I moved back as an attorney practicing entertainment law. I moved back as a Microsoft attorney for a few years when I was closing big deals. So it's home to me, right? It always has been, always will be.
It's so interesting. You went to Hofstra, and then you went to Georgetown, which is I went to Fordham, so we're fellow Jesuit law school grad. Yep. I gotta tell us about your time at Hofstra and the transition to law school. I want to hear more. I've been reading so much about the imposter syndrome that hits you while you're on campus and fighting through that. A lot of our students talk about that, Bruce. They tell me, they say, Polanco, man, I don't know, do I belong here?
Right.
And I found your writing to be so interesting. Tell us about that.
Well, let me say, when I went to Hofstra, before I went to Hofstra, I was at Martin Luther King Jr. High School in the city, which wasn't a very good school. But what I made a decision at 14 that I think kept me out of jail or killed, right? I decided to participate in the co-op program. And that's when you work 1 week, go to school 1 week. So a great decision to keep me out of trouble, but a bad decision academically, because now I'm going to school part-time at a bad school. So it doesn't prepare me for the future, but it's putting money in my pocket. So it's preventing me from selling drugs or doing other things. So when I got to Hofstra, to be quite honest with you, I had to participate in the HEOP program, which is Higher Education Opportunity Program. And I had to complete a summer program to really be admitted. So after the first 2 weeks of the summer program, I called my mother and I said, Mom, this is too hard. I cannot do it. And my mother, and I don't want people to pass judgment, my mother was like, she saw her son in pain. So she said, come home. But then I had to call my aunt, Big Bertha, I like to call her. And she called me and she said, I heard you want to come home. I said, yeah, I'm coming home. She said, what are you going to do? Go back to the projects? I said, maybe. She said, you're going to go back to that job you had working in the basement making copies? I said, maybe. And then she said, ultimately, you're not coming home. She said, because your grandmother picked cotton, couldn't look white folks in the face and had to say, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. She said, your mother picked cotton and had to do the same. And she said, so did I. But she said, most importantly, no one in our family ever graduated, not your generation, ever graduated from college. And she hung up. And I tell people at that point, I would have quit on myself. But at that point, I realized it wasn't about me. It was about the past generations of people who struggled. And it's about preparing, having a purpose for preparing a future generation that they can achieve greatness. And so that's what got me going, right? So when I got to Hofstra, I was unprepared. So the story I tell is that one day I was about 12 o'clock, I was leaving the library. I was the only one walking across campus, and I stopped midway and I said, they don't think I belong here. And I didn't really think I belonged there as well. But I said, I'm here to stay. And two things that carry me forward, JC, to be quite honest with you. There's a quote by Frederick Douglass that states, there's no struggle, there's no progress. And I said, Bruce, this is going to be painful. It's going to hurt. You have to give yourself grace because it's something you've never done before. And one thing I learned real early, and there's another poem by Longfellow that talks about the height by great men reaching kept were not achieved by sudden flight, but they, while their companions slept, were tolling upwards during the night, which means nothing more than you have to outwork people. Because the average person, I learned early in life, don't want to work more than the maximum time required. So if it's a 9-to-5 job, they're gone. If you stay 9 to 6, you'll catch them over time. And so that was my philosophy. Yeah, I felt lonely. I felt like I didn't belong because I wasn't prepared for it. Not that they were smarter. It's just that they had the resources that I didn't have. And I had to catch up over time. And ultimately I did. And I exceeded them, right? It got to a point where the university asked me to tutor this Black kid from the ghetto to tutor the university students in accounting.
Wow.
Because I would just spend most of my time studying, right? What people were partying and having a good time. I studied, only not that I want to, because I had to catch up. And once I caught up, it started to feel good. And I kept doing it because I wanted to exceed where they were. So that was my formula, to be quite honest with you.
Yep. So you had that strong family foundation and your aunt. Well, thank God for your aunt.
Yeah, I thank God for my aunt and my mother. I thank God for my aunt, my mother, and my grandmother. They were my core to real, because I wanted to give up several times, not just that one time, several times. But I'm always reminded of that conversation.
You know, a lot of our students sharing that experience while they're in college, struggling and thinking about finances and what to do, but staying the course because they know there's something better.
Yeah, what's the alternative?
Well, what's the alternative to a lot of us, right? And you were able to do it. Now you joined a fraternity while in college?
I did. I joined a fraternity, and it was an African fraternity that provided a lot of support for me as well.
And I know that you that played an important role in your life when you went to Georgetown as well.
Right. When I went to Georgetown, a few of my college friends went to DC to go to law school as well. And we ultimately, some of us lived together. So it was a support system I had throughout.
That's so important. I know a lot of our students are also in fraternities and organizations and sororities as well. And a lot of our attorneys that are CLEO scholars share their bonds that they have not only with their organizations, but with fellow CLEO alum.
Absolutely.
Now, between your time at Hofstra and going into law school, tell me about your experience with CLEO. I want to know, how did that come about? You know, how did CLEO and Bruce connect?
I mean, I think at that point I went through, like I said, the HEOP programs provided support. So at that point I was looking, one, I needed money, right, to help financially, but also just to have some sort of advantage before I went into law school and understanding what it's about, because I wasn't as fortunate as some of my classmates where their families were doctors or lawyers and they had legal discussions at the table. We didn't have that at all. So CLEO provided that kind of support for me, not just financially, the friendship and the bond that you absolutely stated with other CLEO knights. Some of them quite a few of them went to Georgetown when I was at Georgetown, right? If not Georgetown, George Washington. So it was just that support system where we supported one another. It was like a fraternal organization, so to speak, as well. So it's just going to CLEO and learning what I learned the summer before I went to law school certainly gave me an advantage and gave me the confidence that I can actually do the work.
You know, I hear so many interesting stories about CLEO alums. Do you recall any interesting stories about your time at CLEO?
During the summer, other than I wanted to quit CLEO too. I wanted to quit CLEO too. At one point, I was like, "Law is just not for me. It's a totally different language, and I'm not getting it." Particularly when we started going over constitutional law, I said, "Oh, this is probably not for me. Perhaps I should go back to the accounting profession." But just the encouragement from the faculty and the students, right, kept me going and said, "Hey, hang in there. You can get through it."
This year is the first one after the pandemic that we're going to do live, and we're going to be at Mitchell Hamlin in Minnesota. So we're going to have many students. It's almost a packed house up there, and they're going to experience what you went through, but in a colder climate.
Right. Well, I was in Dickinson in Pennsylvania, so it was a totally different experience.
Yeah, we were there not too long ago. You know what? I want. There's something that's missing here that I want our listeners to get. What motivated you to become an attorney? Right? What was it that said, "I'm going to go get this JD and later LLM, but I'm going to get this JD"? What was it for you?
Well, I'll tell you. Initially, it was unrealistic. I saw Perry Mason on television. I just saw a lawyer on television, and I said, "That's what I want to be." But it was unrealistic. A kid from the ghetto saying he wanted to become a lawyer, didn't have the resources, the finances to really do it. But I think later in life, it's changed from being Perry Mason to being a criminal attorney, because I saw the injustice that took place within our community. So that was my pursuit, right, and motivation. But what happened was, once I got to law school, I had found a new passion, and that was in tax law. And I end up taking maybe 6 tax courses in the JD program, forget about the LM program, because I just enjoyed it. And so that's the route that I actually end up pursuing, tax attorney.
Bruce, man, you weird dude, man. I have never heard anybody say tax and passion together in accounting in the same sentence.
Yeah, it's kind of unusual. And I'll take it a bit further. Out of everything I've done, that's probably the practice area I missed the most.
Wow. You know, it's funny. I've taken accounting classes, and I think during my MBA, and the professor says, JC, in my 25 years of teaching, I've never seen a lower midterm grade. I'll never forget that conversation, Bruce. But, you were motivated. I speak to folks like us, and I had Matlock, I had Claire Huxtable.
Right.
I didn't really have any other attorneys to see, and my mother cleaned the office for one, but I never met him.
Right.
Often we get to watch the attorneys on TV, and it's also unrealistic. I did EOP at SUNY, so I understand that summer beforehand and wanting to be an attorney and not knowing how. I'm so happy that you did go to CLEO though, and you're able to share that experience with us. But something happens. You go to Georgetown. About 10% of the class is of color. Mm-hmm. You share something interesting. A lot of folks may look like us, but they don't come from where we come from. And you share a bit about that in the book. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think that's the reality, right? I think when you go to those schools like Georgetown, the reality is not many of them are first generation. Not many of them grew up in the inner city. So you become a minority within a minority, right? Yeah. And so what I did the first year, certainly I stayed at Georgetown, but I said to myself, you know what, Howard's right down the street. So what I would do every day after class is go to Howard University Law School and hang out with my friends there. And I said, okay, Georgetown's great, but I have some special friends over here at Howard. And that's where I spent my time. It was just a better connection.
Yeah, I see that. Normally we go to folks that look like us and you find out they went skiing in Utah. You're like, well, I've never.
Absolutely. I've never been skiing. And my mother's a lawyer and my father's a doctor. Well, it's a different life for me. Not bad, but it's different.
Right. And what is it? A credit card? But Bruce, I got to ask. You finished your law degree. You thought about becoming a criminal justice attorney, and then you looked at tax law. But you go to another route. Something else is calling your attention. Mm-hmm. Talk to us about that, because you didn't end up exactly going to where you would have thought that you would have ended up.
Right. No, so I practiced tax law for a few years, then I pivoted to entertainment law. And people are wondering why entertainment law. I'll share something here that my friends, I never shared with them. We used to always play in the inner city, and JC, what do you play in the inner city? Basketball. It's basketball courts all over, and all you need was a basketball. And so what I used to do is sneak away because I had a passion to be on Broadway. So I was told by an agent I had, you have to be a triple threat. So that was acting, singing, and dancing. So I used to sneak away and tell my friends I'm going to visit my grandmother to take lessons. But what happened ultimately, by the time I got to high school, I had to make a decision. Am I going to pursue my passion, my dream, or not? And I didn't bet on myself. And I tell kids today, bet on yourself, believe in yourself. That's something I didn't do, because what I looked at, other friends who wanted to pursue the theaters, what they were doing, JC, they were butlers and waiters and waitresses. And so I measured my success on others' failures. And I tell people today, don't look at others and whether they fail or not. You can be successful despite that. And bet on yourself, and don't listen to the negative naysayers or the noise. And so that was the reason I wanted to do entertainment. So I didn't pursue it myself, but it gave me the opportunity to actually represent people. And my first big client was Pete Rock, CL Smooth, particularly Pete Rock as well. And his family's from the Caribbean, close-knit family. So when I heard he was looking for an attorney, I had to go to Mount Vernon, New York. And Pete was the top producer in the country at that point. It's Pete Rock or Dr. Dre, flip a coin. Mm-hmm. And when I went to visit his family basically said, Bruce, his father and his brother, he said, listen, Pete's 18. He must have been 18 about that point. He said, everyone wants to represent my son, even people who don't look like us, but they weren't here to take care of us when we needed help or know that they offered anything. He said, so I'm not going to raise my son until he's 18 years old and hand him over to someone who doesn't look like me. So he said, if you're ready for and you're up for the task, we believe in you. We'd like for you to represent him. And so once I got Pete, of course, I tell attorneys are arrogant, JC. They think it's all about them. They know it's about your clients. Your clients make you. Right. Your clients, basically, you leverage them to get other clients. And so Pete and I still have a relationship to the day. Spoke to him maybe a few weeks ago to try to resolve something with he and Nas. And I tell him, thank you. Because of you, I am who I am today. Because with Pete, we got Heavy D, we got Busta Rhymes, LL Cool J, Junior Mafia, we got Little Kim, we got a lot of folks, Big Pun. So it was all because of him, all right?
Bruce, those are the folks, the artists of our soundtrack of our lives, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And you were there. I mean, that's a big deal. That is huge. We have so many young people that are motivated by thinking that if they work hard, maybe they can get to a level where they're surrounded by these important people, these incredible artists. That must have been an incredible experience for you.
Yeah, I think the 90s were the best music. That's my bias. Best music in terms of rap and R&B.
Second that.
And it was an opportunity where we represented some of the biggest stars, and our interest at that point was to protect their interests. And we were the first to really make sure that LL Cool J ended up getting all his masters reverted back to him in ownership. And that was rare at that point. Most R&B rock artists did not own their masters, but LL did.
Yeah.
So no, we took pride in it, took pride in representing those people who come from the communities in which we came from in a way in which they weren't otherwise represented.
You know, I hear so many horror stories of a lot of those artists of our time, right? Today, which are left penniless without their masters. Imagine how history would have changed if more of them had followed what you were doing with your artists.
Right. I think you're right. But listen, JC, the reality is that back then you had a lot of artists of color. You had a lot of athletes of color, but you didn't have representatives of color in terms of attorneys or accountants or business managers. They weren't there, or they weren't hiring us. So It was a problem. So that's why I was fortunate when Pete and his family decided to take a chance and said, we're going to go against the status quo. We're going to go against what we've been taught and what we heard. And we're going to go with someone of color.
And a lot of them saw themselves in you somewhat, right? You may have been an attorney. They saw their struggle and they said, we can relate to this guy. And that matters.
It absolutely matters. So what happened was, this Burt Bedell was the biggest business manager in the industry, and he represented all the artists. He represented athletes, baseball players. Burt represented everyone, and Biggie named the song, basically quoted him in a song. But I had a great relationship with Burt. But Burt would say to me, Bruce, why are you not referring any of your clients to me? I said, well, Burt, the reality is that I want my clients to get the opportunity to work with women and minorities. And I want women and minorities who ordinarily wouldn't have the opportunity to represent stars to get that opportunity. That if my clients decide to go with you, I'm not going to say no, but it's my job to help advance diversity, because I was one of those professionals on the outside. And so going against the structure, which is what I was doing. So the other attorneys were like, hey, we can't have this guy have all these clients because he'll send a message to other people of color that they can do it too. Right. So what did they try to do? They said, we got to take them out. And there's two ways they tried. They tried by saying, why don't you come join our firm, one, and I declined. And two, they said, let's try to take his clients. And that was difficult because, one, I had that cultural connection, but not only the cultural connection. Remember, I said early on, I knew accounting extremely well. I knew tax extremely well. And I knew how to negotiate a contract just as well, as not better than them. So I came with the substantive skill set and the cultural connection. So they couldn't really do anything.
So interesting. Oh man, I love that part of your book where you describe your time as an entertainment attorney and start listing the folks that you worked with. And I knew that was the connection there. So when someone says, diversity is under attack, you've been at the forefront of diversity before diversity became cool to talk about, right?
Well, absolutely. Because I saw the inequities that exist, right? Yeah. And I knew it right away because I grew up in Brooklyn, but then I moved to the projects in Manhattan, which is Amsterdam housing, right across from Lincoln Center. In Brooklyn, I didn't know I was poor, but when I moved across from Lincoln Center, I realized there was a difference. I realized the inequity that exists.
Yeah, and it's a big one. That's a big one.
Yeah.
Bruce, I went to Fordham, and Fordham is across the street from those projects.
Where I am, absolutely.
So you would have, and for those of you that are listening or watching, you literally have New York City housing on one section, and then apartments across the street that cost millions and millions of dollars.
Yep.
And the dividing line would be Amsterdam Avenue. Isn't amazing?
Absolutely. And the back of Lincoln Center was facing the projects.
Yeah.
And the front was facing Broadway. And that Amsterdam Lincoln Center was really an African-American community. They took the land to build Lincoln Center. That's
right. It's a great story. You know, Bruce, we were talking so long, and I can't leave without going and doing a segue to my favorite part of the show.
Well, let's go.
Which is the rapid fire section.
All right, let's go. Let me get ready for the rapid fire.
All right, here we go. All right. So, Bruce, which is your favorite social media platform? Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Which one is it?
I have to say LinkedIn. Microsoft owns LinkedIn, so it's LinkedIn, of course.
You got to do the plug. You got to do the plug. All right.
Absolutely.
Man. LinkedIn is a great one. Are you a iPhone or a Droid person?
iPhone.
Okay. Ooh. I don't know. Everybody says iPhone. I think I'm the only Android person so far. I think. Which is your favorite restaurant?
You know what? My favorite restaurant now is a Cuban restaurant in Montclair, New Jersey called Cuban Pete's.
Cuban Pete's. And what do you eat there? Give me your favorite dish. Ropa vieja? What is it?
Snapper.
Okay.
With rice and beans.
All right. Here goes. Which is your favorite movie?
I would have to say my favorite movie that I can watch all the time, repeatedly, is The Godfather.
One or two?
Both.
I'll
just watch all of them. I'll sit down.
But never three.
No, I don't really get that far. 1 and 2, I'll definitely watch.
You know, I'm a little concerned about asking you this next one. You don't have to answer it. But your favorite,
I'm not going to answer.
Your favorite album of all time?
Oh, I can't answer that. Well, you know what? I can't answer. What I would have to say is Mecca and the Soul Brothers. I have to give Pete Rock and CL Smooth credit because they made me who I am today. I love all the artists I represent, love all the music, but just because I'm here and they enable me to do the things that I'm doing for society and other people, they put me in a position to do that. So I have to thank them because without them, there'll be no me.
Wow, Bruce, thank you for answering that one, man. I didn't think you were going to do it. I didn't give you Marvin Gaye. You could have said anything Marvin Gaye. I would have been okay with it.
Right.
Favorite city in the world?
I spent some time in a few of them, including Seattle, but I have to say New York City.
New York City.
New York City, absolutely.
All right. Well, listen, thank you for playing the lightning round with us. I really appreciate that. But you did say New York City, and that's going to be where I'm taking you next. My next question. You know, we don't have that much time, I know, but you know, you did run for school board. You did have the urge to make a difference in the community. I want to hear about what made you want to run in the Bronx, and how was that experience?
The reason I wanted to run, I lived in Soundview, to be quite honest with you, and I thought that I was a sure shot to win because Soundview, this school district, that's when it was decentralized. And you had Throsneck, which was an Italian section, and the rest of the actual school board was African Americans and Latino. And I thought I would win, but I got slaughtered because I learned that as much as we have in common, the African American and Latino population, we voted differently. And I learned that. I'm like, God. And my goal was to come in there in the school system to train and to try to change the system so we can provide the resources to train all of the Latino and African American population. Because I see it as we have more in common than we have differences, right? Yeah. We live in the inner city. Culturally, we are the same in many respects. We all have the African connection. And so my goal was to try to come in and really help change things. But the voting didn't go that way. And I thought I was a sure shot because of my educational background, entertainment background, and my desire to really make a change. but I end up getting blown
But
away.
you did it, Bruce, and that matters, and that's so important for our participants to hear. That having a law degree and going through this process opens up so many doors and gives you so many opportunities.
It does.
And you're the epitome of that. You've done it all. And one thing that we haven't spoken about, I've been so involved here in your book. One thing is, how did you end up in Microsoft, Bruce? How did you end up there? Talk to us about that.
Well, one of the things I try to tell students and professionals I know, you got to be strategic with your career. I think companies are strategic. Microsoft is not, there's no accident that Microsoft's the top 5 companies for the last 3 decades, right? Very strategic, right? And so from my vantage point, I tell people for whatever industry they are in, they should look at where the industry was, where it is today, and where it's heading, and try to get a leap start or a head start in the future. And so that's what I did. Because if we talk about digital transformation, JC, right now, all the time, you hear about that. But digital transformation for the music industry took place in 2000. And what I mean by that, we were distributing music, the physical platform, which is albums. And then we went to the digital, Napster, changed things.
Oh, yeah.
And at that point, I said to myself, Bruce, go to a technology company, understand the technology part of it. And after about 1 or 2 years, come back with, you'll have a competitive advantage over all the attorneys because they didn't know it. And not just the attorneys, but all the business people in the music industry didn't know it. So that's why I went to Microsoft. I was going to come back. But then when I looked back after 2 years, the music industry was upside down because they didn't embrace the change. And then they come with a business model for the new means of distribution. And they suffered for years for that, right? It wasn't until recently that it started to turn around. But you have to just be strategic about your career moves.
And when you ended up, because you leave the Bronx, you leave New York City, you spend some time in Seattle, right? Mm-hmm. That transition, how did you end up just going to Microsoft and having so much support from the company? I read Brad Smith's intro. I did. And it seems to me that you succeeded in telling folks from the other side of the tracks why diversity matters. And you did it. So we want to thank you for that, because I see it here. And it, Brad Smith was so passionate about that introduction in your book.
And Brad's the vice chairman, for those of you who don't know, of Microsoft.
Yeah. He's exactly, vice chair of Microsoft. Thank you, Bruce. So you were able to do that, but Microsoft saw something in you, Bruce. They said, we need this guy on our team. Well, what? Talk to us about that. That's so important for us to hear. I want to hear from you.
Yeah, I think one of the things I brought to Microsoft at that time, you got to think about it. I wanted to go there and learn the technology aspect. Microsoft wanted to somewhat get into the music business. So I had that. So I was able to help Microsoft get into that business with my relationship and with my know-how. So that's what they wanted, really, just my skill set. But when I got there, I was lonely. I was the 3rd African-American attorney hired. 1 left before I got there. So it was just me and a Nigerian sister. And JC, to be quite honest with you, after 2 years, I said to Microsoft, I'm leaving. And they said, it was Brad Smith again. He said, why? I said, because there are no people of color here. I would see 1 African-American a day if I'm lucky. And he said, I understand. And he said, let's get you back to New York. And that's how I got back to New York. And he made a commitment. He said, we got to make things different here at Microsoft. And I kind of held him accountable for that. And I did everything that I can do up until this point to continue to advance diversity and inclusion, because it's an important agenda of mine. And I certainly utilize Microsoft, who also has an important agenda around D&I.
That's a great story, Bruce. It segues into my next question for you. Is we are seeing a lot of attrition of attorneys of color. They're leaving firms. A lot of the reasons why you mentioned that you were considering leaving Microsoft. What advice do you have for them? These new associates or junior partners that are thinking, I see no future here in this game. What advice do you have for them?
Yeah, I think one of the things you got to stick the course, right? You have to, unfortunately. I think I would encourage you to get mentors, right? It's important to have mentors. Hard work alone is not enough. I had mentors, and not all my mentors look like me. So there are people who want to be helpful out there who may not look like you, and you have to accept their help and be open to it. So I think do that, but I think it's also important for us all to get sponsors. Brad is my sponsor. When I tell people that, they say, oh, you're lucky. And you're absolutely right. And so the next question should be, how do I get a sponsor when it doesn't happen organically? Because it doesn't always happen organically for us. So if it doesn't happen, I tell people all the time, you have to, again, be strategic. Whatever organization you're in, find out who has influence. And those are the people you want. And it doesn't necessarily always have to be someone at the top of your organization. It could be someone in another organization within your company that has influence that you should try to establish a relationship with. But one of the things I think people miss, JC, is that you can have a sponsor that's someone on your level, because that person has a relationship with someone else that's very influential in the organization. So don't miss that at all. It could be someone on your level next to you who has a strong relationship with someone who's influential. And that can be your sponsor, someone at your level.
You know, I teach at CUNY BMCC, and I've been there since 2007. And every single semester at the beginning, I have every student introduce themselves, tell us about who you are, what you want to do, what are your dreams, and something interesting about yourself. Helps me when I write recommendation letters. But more importantly, I tell them it's about your network. Your network matters. And I hear too many students say, oh, it's about who you know. No, it's who knows you.
Absolutely.
You need to be out there and not be afraid to network and network with your peers, like you mentioned, is so important.
Oh, absolutely. But you're right. People always say, I know him, I met him. And I'm like, when you meet somebody, know you're going to meet somebody influential. Just don't shake their hands. They're going to forget you. What I used to do is some of my leaders, I would have something in my back pocket. When I know they're coming to town at Microsoft, I already would have something I want to say. Like, oh, what are you doing? I'm actually helping companies migrate to the cloud, by reaching their potential by migrating to the cloud. And they say, oh, that sounds interesting. So they'll remember things like that. So you got to tell them something that they will remember, not just a handshake, because they won't remember you. That has been a missed opportunity for you.
I'm so happy to get to hear from you, as someone who's reached the apogee. Bruce, what's next for you?
You know what? Everyone asks me that. I said, Brad's going to be the first person to find out. And my response to everyone else is, God took me to where I am today. I'm sure he has plans for me tomorrow. So, JC, when I hear from God, I'll let you know.
You know, Bruce, is there anything else you want to share with our participants and our listeners?
No, I would just want to share with you. You can achieve whatever it is you want to achieve. Just believe in yourself. And as you grow and move up, make sure you bring others along. And let's go back to the communities in which we're from, right? Because the kids need to hear and see us. They can only achieve what they see and believe. And they have to see us. So that's what I would encourage everyone to do.
Thank you so much, Bruce, for being our guest. Bruce, attorney, author, Never Far From Home, available on Amazon, on Barnes & Noble. I encourage all of you to pick up this book today. It's inspiring. It is incredible. Please pick it up. Bruce, thank you so much for joining us today at the CLEO Edge podcast. It has been quite an honor to have you with us and sharing your story with us.
Right. If they pick up the book, I just want to say in closing that all the royalties will be donated to not-for-profit serving the underserved community.
Wow. I didn't know that. Bruce, that's incredible. Please pick up this book ASAP. We all at CLEO have gotten it. I'm almost done with it. I'm so happy that I had an opportunity to meet you, Bruce. And can I tell you, mission accomplished. You've inspired me. You've changed the world. And guess what? You're changing hearts and minds with this book. I can't wait to see the movie. Now, I know my biopic is going to be starring Lenny Kravitz. I gave you an opportunity to tell us who you think is going to be the actor playing Bruce Jackson in Never Far From Home.
I have no idea. We'll see. I just know it won't be me.
Thank you so much. I almost called you Idris. Freudian slip. Thank you so much, Bruce Jackson.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today.
It's been great.
Thanks so much. Thank you again for joining us on the CLEO Edge podcast. I want to thank attorney Bruce Jackson for joining us and sharing his story about perseverance, his mission to become an attorney, and becoming a champion of diversity. You know, we here at CLEO are very excited about celebrating our 55th year. It is our Emerald anniversary. That's why we're going all out and telling viewers and listeners to please visit our website at cleoinc.org. Follow us on all social media platforms at CLEO Scholars. Press subscribe and like so that you're notified of our next episode of the CLEO Edge podcast. When you're on our website, you're going to see some events and programs that you may want to participate in. On May 24th in Washington, D.C., we have our first annual Spring Bloom, and that's at the offices of Golston and Stores. And on July 7th, Friday night, right here in New York City, we have the first annual New York Yankees Slam. And the Chicago Cubs are facing the New York Yankees on a nice Friday night in July. Come join us and participate at our events. We're looking forward to seeing you again when we bring you some more stories of perseverance and attorneys from all over the country to share their stories with you. Thank you again for joining us.